Welcome to the Vendée Globe English Language Live, 8th of December, 31st day of the race. From a cold and sunny Les Sables d'Olonne on the west coast of France with my friend Will Harris today, who's a Figaro sailor and performance analyst for Boris Herrmann. Thanks for being here today, Will.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Will, we talk a lot about being on the break, sailing at a low percentage of the polars, and this kind of thing. And I wanted to talk a little bit today about the decision-making process, how the guys at sea judge risk, and this sort of thing, as it seems that sort of risk-reward decisions are what determine the placing almost more than anything else. Before we get into that, the most exciting video to come in overnight is from Charlie Dallin at the head of the fleet on a Pivia. He's living the most difficult part of his decision to push ahead at the low on the head of the fleet at the moment, sailing in 45 knots of breeze on the beam with 3 reefs and no jib. Behind everyone is settling in on the weather train, moving along nicely with no major problems to report. Will, it's hard to imagine the level of violence associated with sailing one of these boats in a low-pressure system. Let's look.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's such we could see that low pressure forming behind Charlie Dallin the last few days. It's been kind of coming up to him, and to be in that situation where you're alone on the boat and having to decide how you're going to deal with such an intense low would be really difficult for Charlie, I think. We've seen that lows picked up to sort of 45, 50 knots now, and the boats are obviously, you've really got to think about how long this race actually is. It's 80 days long roughly, and you've really got to manage your expectations of how you can sail the boat. And what's really been interesting to see the boats having to deal with as they've got in the Southern Ocean is how their performance actually is. With these new foilers, we never saw them in the Southern Ocean and conditions like this, with sea states averaging 4 and 5 meters, and we can really see how it's slowed them down a lot. They're probably sailing at 85% of what they really can do in in kind of flatter water conditions. So
absolutely. Hey, listen, let's look at some images from a PV from this morning.
Bon, voilà ce que ça donne sur un PVA ce matin. J'ai dû rouler le tourmentin parce qu'il y avait trop de vent. Et voilà, c'est un peu la guerre. Dehors, là vous pouvez le voir. C'est un petit peu la guerre. Et ça va. Le bateau tient le coup. Je tiens le coup.
Quite a sight to see Namoka in such outrageous weather. So far in the race, Thomas Royan is the only one to have seen such conditions like that. Behind those two, let's have a look at the rest of the fleet. Louis Burton seems to have solved his problems, been sailing well, taking third from Yannick Bestevin after having sailed 380 miles overnight. On the other hand, he's likely in the path of the worst of tonight's forecast strong conditions, likely to take a hiding, whereas others like 7th place Boris Herrmann, after Damien Seguin, Isabelle Josh close behind, heading to the north to escape the worst of it. Moving on to the second third of the fleet, Banque Populaire and Pure Best Western still locked in place with each other, keeping the same gap back to Armel Tripon, about 700 miles astern. Alan Roura, La Fabrique in 15th place, is in the process of making a substantial break from the group of 4 that existed previously, opening a gap of around 100 miles on his compatriots who are having a harder time negotiating the low than he has. Just after them, among our international entries, we find Didac Costa and Pip Hare 19th and 20th in unstable conditions, but soon they'll find themselves in the Southern Ocean conditions being enjoyed by the last third of the fleet as the low catches them. In the back third, DMG Maury and Chevral have been quite a bit faster than the rest of the pack overnight, with only Seb Destremo able to keep the pace with these much newer boats. Back to decision making, it's obviously driven by the weather in conjunction with each boat's individual performance. We have 2 weather situations super interesting today, starting at the front of the fleet. Let's have a look at the weather. We spend a lot of time talking about low pressure systems, fronts, and associated weather phenomena. here we have an amazing satellite picture today. This is the front. It's very obvious where it is in the satellite picture. The low pressure is here. Basically a front, as we all know, nature abhors a vacuum, and the low pressure is pulling air into it at all times. Upper level air is coming down from here along the path of least resistance and into the center of the low. As we can see, we have a PVO, which is right still on the edge of the front, linked out, which has dropped back off the back of the front. If we continue moving forwards, we can see this in a little bit of the more normal format. Here again, Apivia just there on the edge of the front, just about to fall behind. Linked out, who already has and has started to make his move with the westerlies behind the front. The boats behind are all in the process of positioning themselves, especially for this next bit of breeze which is coming in. Further back in the fleet, off of the southern part of Africa, again, we have our group of four. We have Armel Tripon, who has already managed 100% to get ahead of this low pressure, which has been something we've been watching for the last couple of days. The other boats in the night, they've tacked, gone towards the center, and now have tacked again to try to go across the front. As we can see from the graphic, Alan Ruro on La Fabrique has done a much better job of his positioning than the other boats. They find themselves a bit on the back side of the low pressure, whereas Alan has managed to find himself really in a good position to go fast and to keep up. We can see an animation of this as well. Moving forward through time, we see Alan accelerating with the wind of the low, keeping up pretty much with L'Occitane, whereas the others are quite far behind. Alan also manages to keep the wind for a lot longer. As L'Occitane falls into lighter wind closer to the high, Alan is able to make up a bit of lost ground at the same time, whereas the others are going to be trapped behind in the light winds behind this low which has passed by. Well, there we have it. That's quite a lot of information about the weather. So, Will, keeping in mind that Charlie already had around 200 miles of lead and probably only gained about 60 miles with his decision, sitting in your armchair in England, does that seem like a reasonable risk to have taken?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's a pretty tricky call to make there. I mean, when you really look at it, he probably would have sat there a long time. This is Charlie, would have sat there for a long time looking at the weather, and just there really weren't many options to avoid the whole situation. If you went to the north, you had to sail really long extra distances, effectively stop the boat to avoid it. If you sailed to the south, it was kind of a similar situation. So it looks like he kind of just sat there and said, right, we're just going to ride it out, sail it slow, keep the boat going easy. But with the Southern Ocean forecasts, it's so hard to predict exactly how they're going to develop. We saw that low that Charlie's been dealing with. It formed along that really long cold front, really long and powerful cold front, and just the intensity of it just kind of kept on increasing over the last 24 hours. So for a 60-mile gain, it's not a big gain, but we'll see how he gets on in the next 24 hours. But it looks like he's managed to make it through it relatively unscathed.
Absolutely, yeah. And same thing with Thomas. I mean, I think Thomas took positions are different, obviously, but he took a little bit of a lower risk option, slowing, going to the north, and trying to let it form and pass below him. Saying that, as the front went over, he was reporting that he had 50-knot gusts, so not anything easy there. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean that video we saw there of Charlie with his storm sail furled, and you could just see the water was white, and that just tells you it's pretty windy out there at that moment. Thomas did well to get through it as well. He was in a pretty similar situation to Charlie. Yesterday it looks like he was having to pass through the center of it. But yeah, like you say, slightly more to the north means he had a bit more of a chance to escape it. But you can see behind the next boats are already starting to deal with the next kind of bunch of breeze coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. That's 100% true. That brings us actually perfectly into our next topic. A good example of low risk is Boris Herrmann, who we spoke to this morning on live video.
Now today my mood is better, and we went okay through the night, and I'm still quite. Yeah, everything is safe here. So you know, safe is so relative. Then I have gusts at 44 knots with my jib top up, and you're just standing in the cockpit next to the tiller, ready to kind of intervene should the boat broach.
We hear the same thing from every competitor. Oh, I've lost a lot, but then it's perception, not reality, I think.
Oh, that's good to hear. It's crazy to realize how different the reality of the Vendée Globe in the Southern Ocean is compared to the 1 or 2, 3-day trainings we do in the Atlantic, starting from Lorient, where we usually manage to be like at 90–95% of our polar over a 24-hour period. And here I'm even struggling to keep up with 80% of my polar. So I don't want to go lower than that in my routings, but it's very different sea states in the Atlantic, and the irregular wind is just it's just a different thing.
Looks like the next weather window for you to do a little bit of work on that J2 that you've told us about is in 3 or 4 days, no?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I said myself. I think it's Friday or so in 4 days. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. That having a job done is always a great boost for morale.
Conditions for this evening are going to be a little bit rough again, huh?
Absolutely, yeah. I see 35 on the grip file. I did my routing with a max wind limit of 34. So I just jibed before this call. And I'm now on port tack because like that I avoid a zone, at least according to the grips, I avoid a zone with stronger wind than that. So kind of 34 is my max wind on this routing, and the gusts I would expect 40 for sure, maybe 45. So as soon as this thing goes out of control again, currently I'm on the jib top. If that goes out of range, then I will be J3 and 2 reefs.
Sounds like you have things well under control. That's the good thing. Obviously, all about preservation of the boat and the sailor on board.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel well rested today, and now I will have lunch, and yeah, life is good today. I had a couple of down days where I felt a little bit down, but I guess that's part of the game.
Well, when you feel down, give me a call and I'll help you. Oh, there we have it, Boris Herrmann in good spirits. Will, for me, this is pretty classic Boris Herrmann, being very careful. You know, the one thing about it is he is very handicapped with the lack of J2 at the moment. He's either got too much sail up, as he's talking about gusting 44 with the J1.5, or sailing with the J3 and going quite slowly and being worried about losing miles all the time. Tell us a bit about those two sails, just quickly.
Yeah, so it's really interesting hear him say that, because obviously your J2 and your J3, generally you would have thought that's more an upwind sail, and he's currently sailing downwind in the Southern Ocean, and those are the sails exactly that you're looking for. You know, if we look at the size of the 3 sails, you've got the J1.5 at about 130 square meters. The J2 is about 109, and the J3 is 55. So you can really see the jump from the J1.5 to the J3 is just huge, and it's really hard to not have that middle balance of the J2 for him, I think, at the moment. And that's costing him quite a few miles potentially in the last few days, because he has to keep getting up, changing the sails, changing between them each time a gust comes, which is quite often in the Southern Ocean.
Absolutely, yeah. I remember when he and I did the Barcelona, we sailed almost the entire time with the J2, and you could sail between anything from 22 up to 42 knots of breeze with it. He never had to make any changes, so it really, I feel for him having to go back and forth. It's terrible. Speaking of having sailed with him, we have a social media question, which actually applies to both of us at this stage, having both done some racing with Boris. You were the co-skipper of Boris. What's his worst habit on board? I'll let you go first, Will.
His worst habit. That's good. It's probably never taking his slippers off and never putting his offshore gear on. Boris is always a fan of trying to stay dry, and for good reason when you're at sea for 80 days. But every now and then you do have to go on deck and get wet sometimes. But it was more often than not me who was up on the bow getting wet. But
funny, I had exactly the same experience. I think for me the worst habit of Boris, seeing as how big I'm a big guy. I would wake up in the morning and I would see sad puppy dog eyes quite frequently, and those sad puppy dog eyes came to me to mean that that he had eaten all of the candy out of the day's food bag before I'd even woken up. Did you have that experience?
Yeah, that's a very good point as well. The Haribo do seem to vanish when you're sailing with Boris.
Moving further along in the fleet, I had a chance to talk with Alan Rohrer this morning, who discussed his choices on how he was tackling the low pressure which blocked his path. Here we have Alan.
Well, not so bad. In heavy condition till yesterday evening. We have about 25-30 knots right now, so it's not so bad. But the problem it's the wave. They're not in the good direction. They're in front of us, so we're jumping the waves all the time. So I need to slow down the boat all the time, because if not, I'm gonna break everything. But yeah, it's a nice depression. I'm happy to be here. It's a war.
Can you tell me your thought process for going into this low pressure, please?
Well, yeah, actually, for the first time, the weather forecast wasn't so bad. Yesterday, I took a decision to take the depression on one side, and they said they will take one side, but they were due west. I thought, let's see how they're gonna do it, and actually they couldn't pass it, and yeah, that's life. I mean, they're about 100 and something miles behind now, so it's quite cool, but it's not enough. Hopefully, if I manage to be fast enough in all this depression, I can manage to have them 300 miles behind in 2 or 3 days. So that could be really cool. But same thing, I need to be careful of the boat, because she's suffering a lot now on those conditions. So safety first.
Yeah, I say, was there any possibility of following Occitan?
No, I don't think so. Or if the depression is a bit too fast, maybe he will slow down a little bit, but he will have a better condition than us. Actually, L'Occitan will have the best condition. I should have not so bad condition, and behind it will be in really strange condition, because there will be this high pressure just after the storm, and it will be no wind for them. I will keep a bit of wind, and L'Occitan will have 20 knots, 25 knots of wind, so it should be faster. But we'll see in the Indian Ocean. Everything can happen. We can have light winds, we can have strong winds. It really happened. I mean, it's really strange condition this year on the Vendée Globe.
Absolutely. Well, listen, you seem to be in good form, on the attack, trying to gain miles, and that's very good to see. Are you always like this, or do you have down days as well?
Well, I've had a lot of down for the last 2 weeks. It was really hard for me to accept that the race is over. I mean, it's going to be really hard for me to catch up the others. I'm saying like Clarisse or Romain, they're really far away. But everything can happen. They could have a big storm and need to turn around, or there is possibilities. So I try to push myself to be happy and strong enough to push the boat and try to be closer to the others. But those conditions for me was really hard to accept, that on the Southern Ocean I'm doing upwind and in light winds, and then now it's storm, but it's not downwind or really reaching. It's more like an upwind storm. So yeah, I'm disappointed.
It's very nice to speak to Alan Rohrer. He's got a very clear thought process and obviously tons of enthusiasm. I wanted to move back a day or so and have a look at our 3D model. We can see that Alan made perfect choices at the perfect times. He, Boissier, and the Diraison went into the low together. They tacked at different times, and Alan picked his moments quite a bit better. You can see where the other boats end up getting caught here in the center of the low in very light wind. reporting 5 knots of breeze and 5-meter waves, whereas Alan managed to get quite a bit ahead. Will Harris, what do you think that the other guys in that situation could have done a little bit better?
Yeah, you saw in that image there that Alan had really taken it right to the edge and timed everything pretty perfectly. You know, I guess it's a lot about your mentality at each moment of the race in terms of when you're making your strategy.
Yep.
You have to work out when you really need to be pushing the boat and when you need to be kind of making things a bit easier and you know, taking a bit easier. But maybe that would have been one of the moments to really be pushing as hard as you could to get over that low, and then after that you can relax a bit and you know, kind of be sailing in the nicer downwind conditions. But you know, it's always tricky to know when those moments are, when the best moments are to push. Maybe they could have tried to get a bit further to the east if possible before crossing over it. But you know, who knows?
Yeah, it is hard. You know, there's so many little tiny things that go into these decisions, and maybe, you know, there was certainly things happening with all those guys that we don't know sitting around at the house. So I don't know. I think it's pretty amazing to see what people are accomplishing. How do you feel about about Boris's next little while here?
You know, Boris is going well at the moment. You know, you heard him say there that he had a few down days, and I think, you know, whenever someone's sailing around the world for the first time by themselves, it's going to suddenly hit you at some point, and it kind of felt like the last week Boris has kind of had that a bit. He's kind of you know, kind of missing that human contact, I guess, and it feels like he's over the hump, and now he's kind of back into a fighting mode and pushing hard. We've seen in the last 24 hours of reports, he's kind of been one of the fastest 3 boats in the fleet, which is really nice to see. And I think as well as that, you know, he's got this wind in the next 48 hours to get through, kind of the second part of this low pressure system where he's going to have 30-40 knots of wind. And then after that, from Friday onwards, like he says, he's going to be a bit calmer. And it might be a bit of a chance to kind of have a break, check over the boat, fix that J2 that he's had a problem with, and also he's got his hydro generators to sort out as well. So,
yeah,
you know, I think he'll be able to push himself forward into that mode there. And it was interesting to see Alan there as well when he was talking there about how to keep himself motivated. I think that's so great to see that you know, he keeps talking to himself and keeps motivating himself to push at the right moments, and maybe that's why he managed to make that nice call there.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Will, thank you very much for being with us today. Your insight, as always, is very valuable, and it's been good speaking with you. So, listen, everyone, don't forget to tune in tomorrow. Ask questions on social media, and we'll see you this evening at 6:30 p.m. for the live.